Tonight on Politicat, Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss shares updates at the state of the city.
The latest updates on former President Trump's ongoing hush money trial.
And Northwestern President Michael Schill to testify at a hearing on campus anti-Semitism before Congress.
All that and more tonight on Politicat.
It's your politics right now.
Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Lena Peterson.
And I'm Ananya Chug.
We begin tonight as college campuses across the country cancel graduation ceremonies after pro-Palestinian protests and unrest. Columbia University, the University of Southern California, and other institutions have announced event cancellations, citing security concerns. This graduating class of students also had their high school graduations canceled off due to COVID-19. At Columbia, dozens of smaller ceremonies will be held in lieu of its main commencement. USC will also host school commencement events. Columbia said in a statement that it was, quote, focused on the events at hand and keeping the campus community safe and secure.
Here at Northwestern, President Michael Schill will testify before Congress next week, following the school's negotiations with the NU Divestment Coalition. The House Committee on Education and the Workforce will hold a hearing titled Calling for Accountability, Stopping Anti-Semitic College Chaos, with testimony from President Schill and leaders from Rutgers University and UCLA. In a letter to the President Schill, the committee cited their concerns regarding Northwestern University's response to anti-Semitism and its failure to protect Jewish students. Education and Workforce Committee Chairwoman Virginia Fox sent a letter to President Schill requesting documents and information concerning Northwestern's handling of anti-Semitic incidents on campus. Northwestern has until May 17th to produce these documents. And with nationwide protests and encampment responses to Israel-Hamas, we now turn to updates in the Middle East. Politicat's Raj Ganeker and Kendall Wright have the details. Thanks for joining us today. Last week marked 7 months of the Israel-Hamas war. What are the latest plans for support in the region?
Thank you, Ananya. Well, there's no debate that there's been a large toll on human life in Gaza and the region overall, with over 113,000 civilians have casualties, as well as 10,000 people with just overall issues, missing, hostage crisis going on as of late Sunday morning. Last week, the U.S. military has successfully completed a construction pier right off of the Gaza shore, along with the Israeli Defense Force, or IDF. This hopefully will bring about 150 trucks to the region to deliver humanitarian aid and other support. These efforts come after a series of Israeli airstrikes, which unfortunately killed 7 members of World Central Kitchen just last month.
Thank you for those insights, Kendall.
Yes, and back in Israel, protests sprang up in several Israeli cities throughout the weekend, with several calling for the release of hostages taken by Hamas on October 7th. And it's very important to recognize here there's an anti-governmental aspect to these protests. Demonstrators calling for the resignation of Israel's President Benjamin Netanyahu. This comes after Netanyahu refused the details of a ceasefire just last week, which would have released several hostages.
And Kendall, you've been keeping an eye on the offensive on Rafah. So what's the latest there?
That's correct. An offensive has launched on Rafah, the southern city right on the Gaza Strip, which borders Egypt right to the west. And currently in Rafah, there's more than 1.4 million displaced Palestinians, as well as over 100,000 people having already fled the region, going either east or north. This offensive may come as a surprise to many, as the Biden administration said they would consider withholding weapons to Israel if they carried out a full-on assault on Rafah and then the other cities remaining on the Gaza Strip. The first time we've seen the Biden administration go this far in its pushback against Israel's war strategy as well as its tactics. However, this is not necessarily an unprecedented move by the executive branch, as we've seen prior presidents such as Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush both withhold weapons predicated on Israel's actions during their respective presidencies in the 80s and early 90s. It's an important distinction, however, to make that the president did not say he will stop all incoming aid, just offensive weapons, in this case, bombs. The U.S. will still continue to provide defensive aid, missile resources, and more in the coming weeks.
My last question is for Raj. So in recent weeks, many students at U.S. universities around the country have mobilized to urge their schools to divest from Israel. What's the latest on these efforts?
Well, Ananya, we've seen sort of 3 outcomes The first is kind of a refusal to negotiate or a failure to negotiate. And in this case, campus or local police are sent into these demonstrations, these encampments, to conduct mass arrests. And that's actually led to over 2,000 students at campuses across American universities being arrested. And in some cases, we've seen this even escalate further. Columbia, definitely a very potent example. After an encampment was set up, the NYPD was sent in to conduct arrests. The next day, another encampment was set up. And then negotiations started. And unfortunately, those fell through. Right. And so then those student protesters actually took over Hamilton Hall on campus, and then another NYPD raid was conducted. So, I mean, this has, snowballed into Columbia's semester being turned into a hybrid semester. And so we see turmoil like this really affecting schools. The second sort of situation we've seen is a successful negotiation. Brown, and obviously right here at Northwestern, an agreement between administrators and student protest representatives has led to, divestment has not been in any of these agreements. It's important to note here. But there's certainly been other ways in which administrators have tried to appease student demands. At Brown, 5 students from the Brown Divestment Coalition will meet with 5 members of the Corporation of Brown University this month. And at Northwestern, right here, a temporary space has been set up for Middle Eastern and North African students with a permanent space in the works. And finally, the last thing we've seen is the rarest, and that is actual divestment. Evergreen State College is the sole school in Washington State that has moved forward with divestment after an agreement was reached between administrators and students, and the school is now pledging to divest from companies that profited off of the conflict.
Right, so thanks, Raj and Kendall. We'll continue to follow this.
We turn to the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russian forces have entered Vovchansk, a northeastern border town near Kharkiv. Russia has intensified its attacks against the region since Friday's surprise attack across the border, seizing at least 9 villages. This siege marks one of the most significant ground attacks since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Ukraine's military said it had pushed the enemy back from the outskirts of the town. However, thousands of civilians have fled towards Kharkiv, and officials are concerned about the possibility of Russian troops reaching artillery range of the city. Russia has deployed significant forces and have had tactical successes in its latest offensive. This fighting is ongoing and has spread to the settlement of Syriza. Congress has attempted to pass a foreign aid bill, including Ukraine, through both chambers on multiple attempts. Gabe Bernick joins us now in studio to explain this process.
After months of pushback from Republican opposition, President Biden approved a foreign aid package totaling $95 billion. Ukraine received $61 billion, nearly 2/3 of the total funding. $26 billion went toward the Israel-Hamas conflict, with $15 billion in military aid to Israel and $9 billion to humanitarian aid in Gaza. About $2 billion went toward regional U.S. military operations and $8 billion to the Indo-Pacific region, replenishing weapons for Taiwan and expanding U.S. submarine presence in the area. As for the Ukraine funding, the $61 billion is allocated to replenishing the U.S. stockpile of weapons in Ukraine, contracting new weapons to Kiev, and transferring existing weapons. The White House announced that the first $1 billion worth of weapons will primarily fund short-range anti-aircraft missiles. They also included supplying Bradley vehicles, anti-armor systems, and mines for offensive measures. However, noticeably missing from the deal was Patriot missiles, the only operational air defense system that can shoot down opposing attack missiles. The aid package included a provision that would force ByteDance, the Chinese parent company of TikTok, to sell the app within a year, or else face removal from app stores in the U.S. This provision came after U.S. officials claimed that the Chinese government could gain access to users' data through the app and use information to spy on Americans.
Thanks, Gabe, for those details. Coming up, we have the latest on the antitrust cases bringing Silicon Valley giants before Congress. We'll be right back.
Trying to work my way out of the prison system was the most difficult challenge of my life. It only became tangible once I became a Northwestern student.
2, 3, 4.
My relationship with Giannis is unique. We're from the same country, we're from the same city. Being a Northwestern alum, I think, has tremendous advantages in the sports industry. To me, that community, it's been with me for 20 plus years.
Welcome back. In the last few months, Haiti has experienced increasing levels of gang violence, sparking a dire humanitarian crisis. We invite back Politicat's Kendall Wright, who has more on the situation. So, Kendall, there's been a lot happening in Haiti over the past couple of months. Could you break it down for us?
Yeah, Lena. So currently there's roughly 200 gangs operating surrounding the Haitian nation, most notably the G9 and GPEP gangs. Crime has surfaced throughout the nation, such as theft, sexual assault, and even murder. They've overtaken government structures, including seizing control of major ports, such as Port-au-Prince International Airport and its various seaports alongside the coastline, blocking off any potential incoming humanitarian aid from elsewhere in the world. It's also worthy to note that hospitals have been vandalized, as well as warehouses have been broken into, which have already been housing some humanitarian aid and support for quite some time as of right now. There's also been nearly 5 million Haitians, which puts us at roughly 42% of the nation, currently facing severe food insecurity.
And what new developments are happening on the island?
Well, just last month, amidst all the chaos, Prime Minister of Haiti, Ariel Henry, actually resigned, which will allow for a council to operate a smooth transition of power.
And how long would it take for Haiti to have a new prime minister? What's coming next for Haiti?
Well, Lena, to be frank, it could take several months before someone else is elected as head of state in Haiti. It's reportedly, though, however, that this new person elected must be inaugurated by February 2026. So this puts us just under the 2-year mark, if you will. Fortunately, the United States has greenlit a $60 million aid package amid the nation's turmoil. Also, quickly to note, Kenya also plans to deploy police later this month to help with the turmoil going on later this month. That effort is backed by United Nations.
Thank you, Kendall, for that update.
Here in the States, Republican-controlled states continue to impose new abortion bans. However, the Biden administration is challenging one of those bans. In a case now before the Supreme Court, they argue that Idaho's strict rules violate a federal law on emergency medical treatment. NNN's Nora DeCruz explains.
Last week, a case went in front of the Supreme Court considering whether Idaho's abortion ban violates federal law by not allowing emergency abortions. EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, is from a federal law from 40 years ago. Under the law, emergency rooms and hospitals receive Medicare funding, which is almost all hospitals in the country, and they must provide care that ensures the patient's health won't deteriorate, regardless of money or insurance status. The law also addresses situations of women turned away from hospitals while in active labor. EMTALA does not explicitly mention abortion, but it stipulates that in cases of pregnancy, care should be provided for both the mother and the unborn child. In Idaho, abortion is not allowed unless to save the life of a mother. However, some Democrats argue that EMTALA includes women needing abortions to preserve any aspect of their health. However, Idaho argues that the unborn child referenced in the federal law signifies there are two patients to consider. Performing an abortion is, in their view, killing one of those two patients. Idaho is also arguing that they are not in violation of the preemption, which determines that federal law supersedes state law.
Idaho's law and EMTALA are consistent. They both seek to protect the lives of women and their unborn children. The Biden administration can't manipulate one life-affirming law in favor of another so they can override another law.
During the hearing, Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Amy Coney Barrett questioned Idaho's allowance of abortion when a woman's health is gravely affected. Though not by threat of death, for example, side effects of organ loss or future fertility, overall, this case will provide a consensus on post-Dobbs approaches to the abortion debate by the court and state and federal law. A decision is expected to be released in June. Lena?
Thanks, Nora. Tonight we're introducing a new segment we're calling Tech Check. Politicat's Max Rothfeder is here with the latest in technology news.
Thanks, Lena. The wildly popular short-form video app TikTok has come under fire recently and additional scrutiny due to its connections with China. The app's parent company is the Chinese firm ByteDance, which has some Americans concerned about how TikTok may be using their personal data. Now, in April, President Biden signed a bipartisan bill that would ban TikTok in the United States if it is not sold to an American buyer. ByteDance has 9 months to sell the app, with 3 extra months if a deal is in progress. Importantly, placing the sale date after the November presidential election. TikTok sued the U.S. government in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, claiming it is a violation of the First Amendment. The courts will have to weigh against the national security concerns leading to the bill's passage in the first place. Meanwhile, in the D.C. U.S. District Court, closing arguments just wrapped in a major antitrust case against Alphabet, the parent company of Google. The Department of Justice sued Google on antitrust grounds, claiming that the way Google pays other corporations to be the default search engine is anti-competitive. Currently, Google accounts for roughly 90% of all internet searches. The key questions in this case are whether Google's control of the internet qualifies it as a monopoly, and if Google is paying to maintain its position. Google, on the other hand, argues that their domination in the search space is due to having a superior product. While they admit to paying companies such as Apple to be the default engine, they also claim web browser developers voluntarily choose Google as the default. Judge Amit Mehta from the D.C. Circuit is expected to make a ruling by the end of the year. If Google loses the case, they will have to alter their business practices and may no longer be allowed to make deals to be the default search engine. Now, another tech giant, Apple, is facing an antitrust case of its own. The Department of Justice sued Apple in the Federal Court of New Jersey, alleging a monopoly in the smartphone market and practices that stifle innovation and inflate prices. Specifically, there is concern about the way that Apple engages with competing products. Now, this includes that infamous green text bubble, whereby the Message app cannot exchange encrypted text messages with other platforms. Further, there are limits on non-Apple Wallet contactless payment options. Now, Apple has called the lawsuit, quote, wrong on the facts and the law. Further, Apple states that if this suit were to be successful, its ability to create the technology that people expect from Apple would be hindered. Experts say that this case could take multiple years to be decided, likely taking a path through the appellate courts in the process.
Thanks for joining us, Max. Up next, we have the latest on former President Donald Trump's mounting legal troubles.
My relationship with Giannis is unique. We're from the same country, we're from the same city. Being a Northwestern alum, I think, has tremendous advantages in the sports industry. To me, that community, it's been with me for 20 plus years.
Ready, set, go!
This week, former President Trump has entered into a key phase of his New York hush money trial. NNN's Ananya Chugh has been following what's been happening. Ananya, how has the trial progressed since its start?
Yeah, Lena, so first, up on Monday, so former attorney Michael Cohen for President Trump had a testimony on Monday in front of the Supreme Court. He testified that he had secretly recorded Trump ahead of the 2016 election and also alleged lying and bullying for President Trump. That secret recording regarded payments that was made to the National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. He paid basically former Playboy model Karen McDougal $150,000 to own the story of her secret affair with Trump. This recording was played in front of the jury and it had Trump basically saying on camera that he had opened up a transfer for our friend David. This is also a huge controversy because some say that MSNBC was trying to downplay the controversy of Cohen. Basically, obviously, this man is a lawyer. He was a lawyer for President Trump, and it's a bit strange that he was recording his client, within a meeting that they had. So commentators are also remarking on how angry Trump seemed to be during the trial, how visibly uncomfortable he seemed to be. A lot of people are finding that very interesting.
And are we seeing any emerging patterns or themes during the trial proceedings?
Yeah, so Cohen, I think, brought a very personal side to the trial, and I think a lot of people were able to see kind of his relationship and how he came to be Donald Trump's lawyer. A lot of what he said, commentators and legal experts were saying that it made sense, and there's not a lot of other alternative narratives that explain all the evidence like Cohen really has in his testimony. Cohen's a star witness in this trial, but also there lies a question to his credibility. Is this man actually a credible witness because he was a former lawyer for President Trump and he secretly recorded his client in a meeting? Although the cross-examination for this trial hasn't started for Cohen, and that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see. So I think we'll have to wait for that.
And how has public opinion shifted during this trial, if at all?
Yeah, it's something that we really need to keep monitoring during this trial, I think. I don't believe that for the diehard Trump supporters, it's not really going to shake public opinion of it. Obviously, we've seen this man have 4 indictments. Nothing's really happened to him so far. But let's just see how this cross-examination goes in the next couple of days, and we'll see from there.
Thanks, Ananya. We are continuing to follow this as the trial progresses.
And in Florida, Trump's classified documents trial has been indefinitely postponed by Judge Aileen Cannon. He cited significant issues around classified evidence and that needed to be worked out before the federal criminal case goes to a jury. Cannon canceled the May trial date and did not set a new date, pushing the issue closer to the 2024 presidential election. The judge's new schedule outlines all of the legal disputes that she must decide before the jury can hear the case. Trump is also charged with mishandling classified documents and working with 2 co-defendants to block the Justice Department's investigation. Cannon said that the process will take until at least late July of this year.
With November fast approaching and a recent CNN poll gathered information from voters about where they stand on key issues. NNN's Victoria Ryan joins us in the studio to break down the numbers.
Thanks, Lena. According to the April 28th poll, the most important issues for voters are the economy, protecting democracy, immigration, crime, and gun policy. Close behind were healthcare and abortion, foreign policy, climate change, and nominations to the Supreme Court. Voters were also asked about Biden's policies on some key issues. Respondents expressed great disapproval with Biden's handling of inflation, as well as the Israel-Hamas war. Voters remained split on Biden's student loan debt policies, with 55% disapproving and 44% approving. Respondents were also not happy with the economy under Biden. 41% of respondents said a political change in Washington would improve their view on the economy the most, and 53% said they were dissatisfied with their personal financial situation. Now, what does this mean for the election? The poll found 61% view Biden's term as a failure, while 55% view Trump's term as a success. Now, keep those numbers in mind as we take a look at these 7 battleground states, which will likely decide the election. A Pew Research poll in March of this year found that Trump is leading in all but Wisconsin, and this lead is very slight, with 47% favoring Biden and 45% favoring Trump. Overall, the economy appears to be a significant issue for voters. The lack of support for Biden's initiatives may be a sticking point during this election season.
Thanks, Victoria. We'll be sure to keep our eyes on those key issues as we head toward November. Coming up, Mayor Daniel Biss calls on Evanston to take on challenges in his annual State of the City address. Stay with us.
I'm Kelly McEvers, founding host of the NPR podcast Embedded.
I'm James Edwards, host of the Unresolved podcast from Frontline.
I'm Antonia Cereijido, former senior producer of Anything for Selena podcast and current executive producer at Elias Studios.
My narrative, since I've been locked up and kind of made my transition, has been like redemption, accountability.
When I come into the classroom environment, every individual that sits amongst me takes education seriously.
Welcome back. The Chicago Bears are aiming to build a new domed stadium south of Soldier Field. However, the project is facing opposition for multiple reasons, including the public financing component. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson says that the situation requires a solution as soon as possible. Local community group Friends of the Parks is prepared to fight for the lakefront, but does not yet have a fully fleshed out proposal. One of their primary concerns is the 3-phase plan for $1.5 billion in stadium infrastructure projects. Only the first $325 million is guaranteed. 2 later phases will only be delivered if state and federal funding remains available.
Evanston City Mayor Biss held the annual State of the City address this past Wednesday. NNN's Logan Schijano was there.
We've done a lot of good this year.
Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss delivering his State of the City address Wednesday in front of residents and elected officials. The mayor touting the city's recent accomplishments, from banning flavored tobacco to a new program allowing community responders to handle low-level 911 calls.
We are acknowledging that the amount of different things that we ask our cops to do is just impossible.
Attendees say they appreciate the mayor speaking directly to residents.
It's always really good to keep communication channels open and to be really transparent.
Unlike last year, Northwestern President Michael Schill was not in the crowd. That didn't stop Biss from praising City Council's approval of the Rebuild Ryan Field project.
We were able to negotiate an agreement to fundamentally transform the financial relationship between the city and the university.
About halfway through his speech, which took place behind me inside Evanston Space, Mayor Biss shifted to the future, talking about initiatives he hopes will support the climate, affordable housing, and the migrant crisis.
We don't see a crisis like that and conclude that it's somebody else's problem. We're going to figure out what we can do to help.
Biss urging City Council to pass a healthy building ordinance aimed at reducing carbon emissions and highlighting the ongoing work of Envision Evanston 2045. Which will redo Evanston's zoning code.
The most important thing we can do for affordable housing is to add to supply, and our zoning code is the most significant constraint on doing that, but it doesn't stop there, so don't clap yet.
The mayor concluding his speech by asking residents to embrace these changes.
The challenges ahead of us are so significant, and we're not going to meet them by trying to make Evanston great again. We are going to meet them by together envisioning an Evanston we haven't seen before.
In Evanston, Logan Schijano, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Logan, for that Evanston update. That's all the time we have for tonight.
Thank you for tuning in to our last Politicat of the academic year. I'm Lena Peterson.
And I'm Ananya Chugg. Have a good night.